correctly with the correct amount.
D20 Radio, where gamers roll.
www.d20radio.com.
Welcome to Me and Steve Talk RPG, the podcast where me and my friend Steve try and help you get the most out of your role-playing game experience.
Welcome back to Me and Steve Talk RPGs. I'm here with my friend Steve.
Hello.
And we're going to talk about some RPGs. But before we get into that, we got to talk about our podcast for the week. Our podcast for the week is from your friend and mine, GM Hooli and GM Chris, The Forge.
Woohoo! The Forge!
Everything and anything you could ever want about Genesis RPG, you go to get that from The Forge.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, those guys are wealths of knowledge when it comes to that system.
Mm-hmm. I happen to know that as we're talking, they have at least one episode in the can. Just may not be quite edited, but being as we're like a week or two ahead of time, it might be out by the time you hear this.
You know,
might not
or
be.
you'll be hearing, or they'll drop an episode that, you know, they recorded 3 years ago at this point.
Well, time is upside down in Australia, so
yeah, time is upside down for those two, but
yeah, it's a great show.
It is. It's a great show, great resource, couple of great people. So if you haven't yet and you're thinking about it, go check out The Forge.
And there'll be a link in the show note to their main page.
Yeah.
Because I don't remember what the address is, because I just go to the D20 podcast page and click on the link there.
I just message Hooli and ask him if he's got a new episode out. That's what I do.
Well, that too, yeah.
Hey, what's your new episode on? And he'll say something like shrimp on the bobby, and I'll be like, okay.
Hang on, let me put down my Fosters.
Yeah, let me put down my Fosters. I don't know why I go to Boston. I can't do.
Yeah, I know. Mine's not very good either.
Yeah, you know,
especially not impromptu.
No, man, he's gonna get us for that.
That's all right. It's all good fun.
It's all good poking fun. Anyways, this week, no shocker to anybody, I was on TikTok.
How many hours did you mysteriously lose into the void of TikTok this week?
Oh God, don't ask me that. I don't know. I could look. My phone tracks that stuff. I honestly don't know. I think like too many. It's practically become a job, but I don't post anything. I just creep.
Yeah, well, TikTok's weird. Like,
it's a void. It's like a pit of just, you could just fall down this rabbit hole sometimes of just watching whatever.
Well, I finally installed it, mostly because you were pestering me about it.
Yeah.
But like and there's a lot of crap on there. But there's some genuinely entertaining, interesting stuff too.
Yeah,
and there's like pretty much the rest of the internet.
There's some genuinely good creators on there, like the one I'm going to talk about today. The guy's name on TikTok is Matt Stormcrow. I've talked about him before. I really love his stuff. He is. I'd love to reach out to speak with him regarding Vampire the Masquerade, because Matt knows their stuff like inside, outside, and backward. But what I was going to say is, somebody in the comments section came into one of their videos and said about so there was a little bit of discourse going on around D&D and telling players no, and somebody came into their comment section and basically said it's gatekeeping if you tell your players no, you can't do that if they're trying to optimize the system. And everybody was like, so what you're saying is that the GM can't be a player and has to suck it up. And this person just kept doubling down. And I just think it's funny, you know, we never really officially talked about the GM as a player. And that sort of kicked it into my brain that some people have this mindset that the game master, the dungeon master, has to be subservient to the players, essentially, right?
Yeah.
Some people have it in their mind that that's the way it should be. And I think that's a little bit backwards from how I always thought about it. And maybe because I switch hit, it changes my opinion of that. Because I can go from being a player to a GM to a player again, because I have the luxury of having groups that can do that.
Mhm.
I wonder if the people that never GM just think that the game masters are only there for, like, their only fun is, I don't know. I half wonder if some of those people don't think the GMs are having fun. And if your GM's not having fun, I think you have a bigger problem. You need to have a conversation about that.
Yeah. No, I think see, for me, coming in the late '90s, a lot of it, if anything, it was more that as a player, you were playing in the GM's game. But I think, some of that could have been just the way I understood it. I don't know that it was ever expressly stated that way. But also, that was at the beginning of a movement towards a lot more narratively focused stuff. So I think that was, because that was when, Vampire had just come out and whatnot. So, there was a shift going on, to where but at the same point, like, there's always the, well, it's your story, we'll do what fits your story. And look, I mean, if you play either of the ways that we've mentioned at your table and your table enjoys it, good for you. But I think what we've seen, and it kind of been our experience, and it's much more a trend now, is that it's a very cooperative thing.
Yeah, I think that's kind of changed a little bit because as somebody who's played a lot of AD&D, I can tell you that back in AD&D days, it was very much supposed to be an adversarial setup where it's the GM versus the players. The
Right.
GM is trying to kill the players. That was the stated goal in a lot of AD&D literature. Also want to talk about something else maybe later regarding AD&D. I watched I'm not a fan of it, but I watched the first episode of the new season of Stranger Things,
Mhm.
and they did a thing that I was like very upset with. But anyways, because my girlfriend's sitting there cuz okay, if you haven't watched any Stranger Things, part of the crux of that story is that it's a bunch of friends playing D&D.
Right, right. I've watched part of the first season. I haven't gotten around to the rest of it yet.
I'll just tangent now because screw it. I'll come back to what I was going to say. At the beginning of the new season, and this is no spoilers at all because it's literally the first episode. I'm not going to spoil anything that happens in the show, but I'll tell you what happens in the D&D game at least. We open the beginning of the new season with them playing the Cult of Vecna. Do you remember the Cult of Vecna pre-written campaign?
I don't remember it per se, but
Um, so the Cult of Vecna is not super popular, but it is kind of a. I mean, it wasn't uncommon. I remember hearing about the Cult of Vecna and
mhm.
it being a big thing. Well, they spoil the ending to it,
I mean, you are talking about something that is at this point 30 years old
right? But
plus.
also, Hasbro and Wizards are the kings of reprinting old stuff and acting shocked when people are like spoiling it. Like when Strahd came out, everybody was like talking about Strahd, and Hasbro was like, "Oh no, no, don't spoil it, don't spoil it." Like this is a campaign that's been coming out for like 30 plus years. Like this same story, I have it in every edition previous, but
Fair.
the Call to Vecna is not one that they've reprinted. I don't think they've reprinted it for 4, and I don't think they've reprinted it for 5.
Mhm.
And they just decided apparently it's not worth worrying about spoilers. But it's like this is like the big climactic thing at the end of the campaign that makes the Cult of Vecna such a fun thing to run. But whatever. That's a tangent. Anyways, where I was going is yeah, D&D at its base conceit when it was AD&D was players versus dungeon master who wins. The dungeon master was very much trying to kill the players. Players were very much trying to kill everything the dungeon master could throw at them.
Mhm.
And that's how you quote unquote won Dungeons and Dragons back in the day. If your party survived, it was sort of like a Call of Cthulhu game. If your party survived unscathed, or at least relatively unscathed, you won the game, which
Mhm.
is kind of what happens in like Call of Cthulhu. Like if you get out of there not insane,
Yeah, in a way. Making it to the rubber room is winning.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, just getting out of the mansion to the rubber room, that's a win. But that's an old mindset of that player versus, and that's changed even in second edition, third edition, all of the other games that have come out in between there. more storytelling based games. Everything's changed that mindset. There are games out there that, yes, they still exist where it's the players versus the GM, but for the vast majority of games, it's become a collaborative storytelling thing.
Yeah. Well, I think some of that though is there's also, I think, been a shift in, as opposed to players versus GM, I think in some cases it's become a little more player versus the world, or players versus the world, which is kind of the same thing because the GM is arbitrating the world, but in that classic D&D dungeon crawl mindset, it was devious traps and creatures that required specific tactics to fight and etc. And that I think is some of what we've seen diminish.
Yeah. And I don't think that's I think there's a place for that.
Oh, it can be fun, but I don't want a steady diet of that.
Yeah, no, I don't want a steady diet of that either. I need some substance. I was trying to find the word there. I need some a little bit of character in there mixed in, not just constant dungeon crawls, which a lot of that AD&D stuff was.
Yeah. And I think too it's become a little bit of a thing too is to, when you're GMing, like, if you think about it, why do all these monsters just live in the dungeon? And what do they do in the times when there aren't adventurers there? They just hang out and sit there and go, hmm, no footsteps for 35 days. Do they play cards? I don't know.
They sit there and play cards and go fish. No, you go
There's a
fish.
fun, concept for you. Yeah, old school dungeon sometime, and every time you walk into the room, you break up a card game or something,
It's just you realize this isn't a dungeon, it's a gambling den. Like,
Well, what was it that you brought it up for game of the week? Something about dungeon local something or other?
oh yeah, Dungeon Local 001.
Yeah.
Yeah, I that was sort of them building the dungeon. Um, there's a couple games like that are them building the dungeon.
Mhm. But, like, I think the idea that, gradually over time, well, we realize that that's and here's a thought as to another reason maybe some of that's come about is with the advances in video game technology, and now we're past the point where that can happen, but in the early days of video games, it was very what do you wanna say? It was much easier to build that type of game in a video game, and so you can get that fixed that way, and so we want a different experience from when we're playing at the table.
Right, very much so.
I don't know if that's actually kind of what happened or if it just kinda coincided that way, but
I couldn't tell you. And I think another thing, and people can be, you can come at me, whatever. I never I never thought to or had the drive to ever play or ever pay a GM to play a game.
Mhm,
And I've seen it in both local comic shops now and talked to people about it. And, Justin from Terrible Warriors talked about that.
mhm,
That getting paid to dungeon master is now a thing. Getting paid to GM is now a thing. And players paying directly to play in your game is also a thing.
mhm.
And I've never encountered that. And so some of that, I think, if I was, I don't think I would have such a welcoming mindset if I was paying a GM to play in their game. Does that make sense? I would feel like I'm paying for a service.
Yeah, see, I
And I think it would taint, I think it would taint your formative years as far as playing the game.
yeah, like yeah, I
Do you understand where I'm driving at?
it definitely for me wouldn't be the same.
Yeah, I don't know. There's something about there's something about making friends in this hobby.
Yeah. I mean, and I think, like what Justin mentioned that he's done was, at least for the most part, what he was doing was he was actually working for a restaurant.
Right? And that's a little different.
Yeah.
That's a little different than what like I'm not going to put anybody on blast. It's fine. If you do this, that's great. I got invited to a Star Wars server that all they do is play Star Wars RPG, and to join a lot of those games it was like, well, it's $10 and then it's $2 a month to keep playing. It's like, I don't necessarily have the drive or the want to pay you to play this. Like, if I want to play Star Wars, I'm just gonna try and reach out to friends and be like, let's play Star Wars.
Yeah. I mean, at that level, I think it might be more of a, "Look, this just helps me make sure I get players that keep showing up" deal.
I guess, but at the same time, I don't know. It's just a game. Like, how do I put this? I guess I understand the logic of trying to take your hobbies and turn them into a career
Mhm.
because God knows I'm trying to do that myself. But at the same time, a lot of the hobby stuff, like playing games, I never in my wildest thought that I could make money as a GM.
Yeah, I guess for me, how would I say this? If, let's say, for example, a game shop, and I don't not saying that I think my skills are at this level, but let's say a game shop said, "Oh, hey, we'll give you, $20 to come run a session of this on an afternoon, or $10 or whatever." You know what I'm saying? I think I have less of an issue with the concept of getting paid to GM as I do with paying to play.
I think my biggest that's kinda icky thing is if it's getting paid to GM through a third party, it's a little different.
Yeah. I think that's where I was going, kind of.
Directly going to the players and going, "To play at my table, it's $5." Eh,
Now,
that's a little icky to me.
let me ask you this though, and I'm not arguing at all with what you just said, but let's say, and this is kind of going back to the old D&D days where you had all the box set modules and everything, right? Well, let's say you got 4 friends you're playing with, or 5, whatever, and the module is 20 or $25. And you're like, "Look, you guys buy me the module, I'll run it for you."
That's even different, though. Like,
Yeah, see, like I said, like I don't,
that's a that's a different like, that's not me looking at my 4 friends and going, "Give me $5." Why? Because 'Cause I'm here to run the game. Give me $5. You know what I mean?
yeah,
And I get some of that it's not friends, it's just random people on the internet, but it just feels yucky. Like, for example, the local game shop, what they do is they have I think it's Tuesday nights or something. They have a GM that comes in and they run games for brand new players.
mhm.
Okay, I understand the logic behind it. They charge, I think it's $5 per session, and what they'll do is they'll walk you through character creation, they show you how to play the game, they teach you tips and tricks. I get that, but at the same time, kinda, how do I put this? Kinda like, I don't know, I feel like you could learn all of those things by A, reading the book, or B, going on YouTube.
Probably. Now, do you get, like, and I don't know what shop you're talking about, nor does it is particularly relevant, but is it a thing where, like, you also get, like, a cheap set of dice?
I don't know.
You know what I'm
That
saying? Like,
I If you got something out of it, maybe. Maybe that's worth it.
I mean, what's a set of dice cost? 5, $10? I haven't
Yeah,
bought an actual
10 bucks.
set of, like, normal dice in a while, so
Yeah, 10 bucks. I mean, actually, I know exactly what a set of dice costs. This is a visual aid that doesn't play well in audio form. You see this? Oh, no, you can't see that. It looks comically blurred out. Hold on.
yes, it does.
Let me just.
Okay, that was weird.
All right. Do you see this?
Kind of. Let me pop it back to normal size.
For the audio listeners, I'm holding up a pack
Oh,
of
there we
just
go.
polyhedral
Oh,
dice.
yes, the dollar store dice.
Yes, $1.25, baby. Love it. Chessex, eat your heart out. I got dollar store dice. Now, granted, I haven't opened these, so I
Yeah, well,
don't know how they are.
they're also like, I'm not a dice goblin, but those are just like an ugly brown.
Yeah, and
Just saying, that's all.
if I was gonna throw dice at somebody, I'm definitely grabbing dollar store dice and being like, "Here."
But even so, okay, even if that's all you're getting for that, it's kinda like, "Here, come learn to play." You get a set of dice, you know, at that point, you're getting more than, and also, if it's a learn to play thing, that's a lot more one-on-one time. That's, you think nothing of paying for a guitar lesson or piano lesson or
Yeah, but this isn't one-on-one sessions.
No.
This is group sessions, which I guess I've taken group sessions for guitar too, but usually those aren't paid. I
Mhm.
don't know. I understand. So again, that's that third party thing where like the game store's orchestrating the whole thing,
Mhm.
right? The GM's getting paid for the time that they're there. The GM or the game store's mitigating the money that's being paid out, right? Like they take a cut, they give a cut to the GM.
Right.
That's sort of again okay, but the just online culture of give me money to play in my game kind of throws me off a bit.
I wouldn't say I'm a fan by any stretch, but at the same point, like, hey, if it works for you, it works for you. I mean, because let's be honest, there is time involved, at least with traditional system. There's, and running online, if you've got a real good VTT setup, I'm sure had to spend some time, even if it's just collecting the various maps, tokens, etc., from around the game and getting everything all compiled into there. I'm an idiot when it comes to VTT, so but, you know, I don't know. I think it's yeah, I guess too, though, I'm one of those people in a lot of ways, and I've come around on it some, but I've always kind of had a little bit of a hang up on monthly fees for, what do you wanna say, intangible things? Like, if I used to get physical magazines in the mail when I was younger. Well, you pay a subscription. You pay so much a month to get the magazine. You pay so much a month for your cable or your streaming service. Streaming's, I don't know. It's not the same. The one that gets me now is the subscription-based software models. It's like, look,
Oh god.
that's a hang up for me. But like I was even resistant to subscription-based gaming models for quite a while. Just because it's like, but at the same point, that's been a thing for what, 15 to 20 years now?
Yeah,
And how different is that from pay to play RPGs, other than the dedicated time slot factor? Just in principle.
I don't know. I guess not too far off in principle, but I don't know. I
Look,
just
I'm just throwing it out there. Like I think we're in agreement that it's not our thing, but
yeah.
it is definitely a trend. I see it on a couple of different servers that I'm on Discords or whatnot. I don't know. I
Yeah, I don't
guess.
know. I don't know if this is us being an old men thing.
Well, I am, and you just act like one.
I just play one on television. No, I feel like one. Look, all right, listen. I feel like one a lot of days. I
Oh
feel
wait,
like,
it only gets worse.
oh, I know. I wake up and I get up at the ass crack of dawn. I go out and I check on my chickens and I water my garden and I cut the grass. Like I feel like I'm like turning into my grandfather.
Do you yell at the kids to get off your lawn yet?
I almost did the other day. There was there was a kid on a dirt bike and parked in the middle of my yard, and I was almost gonna yell at him. I was like, "Wait, let him." I think he was waiting for his friend, but he like pulled off the road onto my yard, and I was like, "Hey, no."
Oh man. So that was an interesting discussion. I'm not sure how we go back to GM being a player too, because at this point that's a clear delineation. Are you getting paid or are you paying?
Yes, I think the thing of it is that if you're not paying for your GM to be a player, if you're not paying them money, you have some rights, but you don't have a lot of rights. I shouldn't say a lot of rights. I should say you have rights to say what you feel comfortable with as far as content wise, what you're willing to deal with and what you expect out of a campaign. You also have the right to walk away from a campaign. But simultaneously, you don't have say in if the GM wants to like if it's part of okay, obviously, don't do racist, sexist things. That's pretty blatant to say.
Yeah.
But if the GM says this is this is a mostly human world where other non-human races are very rare, I don't think that that's unreasonable for you
Hmm.
to go, hey, everybody, make human characters. I want to tell this kind of story. I don't think it's unreasonable to say if somebody sits down at your table and shows you their character sheet and they are min-maxed beyond min-maxed, to look at the character sheet and go, hey, can you add some flaws to your character?
Mhm.
I don't think any of that's unreasonable, just because that's a GM. Not wanting to have an overpowered character is not a bad thing. But to sit there and be upset that to sit there and be upset as a player that the GM has asked you to tone back your character a little bit, maybe that's not the table for you at that point. And you can get up and leave at any point.
Well, I think when the idea of paying to play comes into the equation, it does change the dynamic of the social contract.
Right.
At that point, and I think it's still even a little different than if, like, where we mentioned where the game shop is paying the person, and the players are paying the game shop. Yeah, it does become a weird customer thing. But yeah, man, that's a can of worms. It really
Yeah,
is.
it is. I think that, like I said, I made my piece about taking that away. But if you are paying the GM, at that point you need an actual social contract.
Oh, you almost, yeah, you almost, yeah, you really do in a lot of ways because
At the point at which you're paying a GM, you need to get the GM should reasonably get on paper what they expect of their players.
Mhm. And conversely, what the players can expect from
And
them.
what exactly. And so before sitting down at that table, I'm paying my $5 and I'm expecting to get this. And I'm expecting to have this. You know what I mean? Style
Mhm.
of game. And it's clear and it's concise and it's laid out. And that's not always easy.
No.
But but if you're getting paid to GM, taking the easy way out is wrong.
Let's elaborate on that a little bit. I'm curious where you're going.
Um, if you're getting paid to GM, but you don't want to put the effort in to actually write out a social contract, I think you're being, I don't know how to put it. I don't know how I want to say this. Basically, you are doing something as a job at this point and not as a fun hobby.
Mhm.
The expectation of making a actual physical contract or listing is not on your shoulders when you're doing this just as a fun hobby that you're doing for fun, but putting the extra effort in to make sure that everything is safe and done to standard should be done when people are paying to play in your game.
Mhm. I mean,
um it's the difference between going to a mechanic, right?
okay.
You go to a mechanic because you expect the work to be done correctly, the right way,
In a reasonably timely manner.
in a reasonably timely manner. Versus calling your buddy, you're going to call your buddy up and ask him to do the work because, hey, I need brakes thrown on. I just need them done. I don't have the time to do it. Can you do that? And you sort of skirt a lot of that expectation because your friend's doing it maybe for free or whatever, however, whatever your agreement with them is.
Yeah.
Like, you're not paying garage prices because a buddy of yours is doing it, so you're not expecting garage quality work to be done. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I think that's the same idea as what I'm driving at with if you're paying to play the game, you should be expecting. I would expect, if I was paying to play in a GM'd game, I would expect a relatively high quality with a lot of effort and time and energy put into the game. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I think I would too. I think I would have, if I were paying to play in a game, I would have a higher expectation.
Right. Versus, we sit down at the table and screw around for a couple hours. We end up walking away having a good time, but I wouldn't expect anybody to pay me for what I do on a normal Wednesday night.
Yeah, no, and well, I think that's where, yeah, the idea of the GM as a player, I think that, in the style that we're playing in our Wednesday night games or whatever, Yeah, we very much are. We're just having fun together. And in that context, I think it is important that the GM feels like a player in some context because look, unless you're someone who is an extreme empath and your enjoyment is solely in feeding off the enjoyment that others are having, which I don't know. I'm not going to make any statements about mental health because I don't know what I'm talking about. But anyway, I think at that point, you're if you're running that game, you need to have some fun of your own as well. And for me anyway, that's not at the expense of my players. That's
alongside them.
yes, that's do they see the thing that I put in the room for them to do something weird with, or if I say yes to this weird question, what the hell kind of fun stuff are they going to do with it?
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like that for me is the enjoyment, and that's me, so to speak, playing is seeing the creativity of other people and kind of that interplay of, well, if I do this, what do they do? Which is actually the much the same way I play a game, except that I'm controlling a world as opposed to a character.
Very much so. I think, yeah, I can't really say it much better than that. I think that the idea of a play as a GM as a player is along the lines of the GM needs to have fun as well. And what fun means to play the game is not necessarily to put the effort and the time, and I I think that's part of the thing that scares people away from GMing
Mhm.
is they think that I wonder if sometimes, and I know I've talked to people about this before and they're like, "Oh, I could never GM." It's like, "Yeah, you probably could. It's really not as hard as you think it is." The dirty secret of GMing is, like I said, it's really not as hard as you think it is. A lot of GMing is just saying, "Yes, I'm going to lick these shoes." Okay, here's what you find. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Or I'm gonna go down this alleyway. All right, fine. Here's what's down the alleyway. And just I play games, and I've talked about this a lot. I run games just off the top of my head, out of nowhere, because I have too many thoughts going through my mind at all times. And it
Mhm.
takes I do put a lot of effort in, but it takes no mental capacity for me to just I don't know how to put it. It takes a lot of mental capacity, but it takes no effort consciously for me to role play as a GM, right?
Mhm.
And that's something that I think doesn't get talked about a lot, and that's role playing as a GM. You hear a lot of people talk about prep. Get ready for your sessions, prep for your sessions, sit down and write. Well, and you do this. I know you do this because I we've talked about it before. I do hardly no prep at all. None. I will as long as I understand the system we're playing in and the basic rules of that system, the rules of the world we're playing in. As long as I understand all of those things, I almost don't need to prep for a session.
Mhm.
I will start with a 1, 2, or 3 sentences of what's gonna happen. I will take notes the entire time I'm running a session, but I'll never write notes between sessions. So I will when I name characters, right? Like, if I name a character Bob Johnson, I'm writing down Bob Johnson, Chief of Police. That goes in my notes. Now I have that next time when I go to talk about, "Oh, you guys talked to, Bob Johnson last week."
Right.
It's right there. That's the only thing I'm like, I'll take little notes like that. I'm relying a lot more on my players' understanding of the world. I'll give the descriptions, I give the story, I give the characters, but I let my players build the world as they see fit. Um, I was running D&D for a new player one time, and they'd never played D&D before. And we were talking about, you guys are walking down a path, you're entering into a town, there's these big gates, town's guard, and the player is asking me about the architecture of the town.
Mhm.
What what kind of houses are they? What kind of, what kind of road are we walking on? And those are all things that, even had I sit down, wrote out the entire scripted event that would have been them entering that town, I would have never put the thought into what the buildings actually really look like.
Mhm.
I would have just put, it's town, it's this shape. You enter in on cobblestone streets and there's towns guard everywhere. People are sort of scattered and scared, right? I never would have put the effort into, well, it's wooden buildings with thatch roofs, and the cobblestone is yellow because that's, sort of matches the stonework around, and like I never would have put the effort into that, right?
Mhm.
And I think that can scare what scares people away from GMing is they feel like sometimes, and I've heard this, they feel like sometimes they have to put all this work into a campaign before they can run it. Yes and no. Yes, you do need to put work into a campaign before you can run it. No, you don't need to put a lot. You just need to have the core of what you want and an understanding of your world.
Yeah. I think and it there I'm very much with you, but I don't think that it's necessarily doing it wrong to build in all those little details and have that fleshed out ahead of time.
No, if that's how your brain works, that's great. But
Yeah.
if that's not, and I know for me personally, and I know if me and you are this way, we can't be the only ones that are this way. That a younger me would have been super turned off by games if I would have gotten the advice that older me has heard, especially to new GMs. If younger me would have heard the advice of a lot of people saying, well, you got to make sure that you put the effort in, and you got to make sure that you take the time to flush out your setting and make sure that everything is spick and span before your players start playing, I think that would have turned me off in a big bad way.
Yeah. Well, I think here's the thing that I kind of and I was thinking about this earlier today, is that for me, when I go to sit down and start working on a world, which I've done numerous times and then discarded and whatever, but like I try to think about it in the context of how is the world lived in, because that's going to affect, where things are, what towns do, you know what I mean? Like if you have a city in your world, and it doesn't really matter necessarily whether it's, fantasy, science fiction, whatever, maybe a little less with science fiction, but, is it a trade city? Is it a manufacturing city? Is it a, you know what I mean? And that's going to affect some things, especially in a fantasy setting. If it's a trade city, that means it's got to be, or it is going to be on some sort of crossroads, or it's going to be a significant port city, because that's how you get trade in that type of world. Unless you have some sort of weird system of portals and so forth, which is all cool and whatever, but that's that's just the logistics of how things are. And as long as you have that idea in your head, then you can go, well, okay, so this city is my trade city. So there's probably either a manufacturing district or a sister city fairly close that maybe does a lot of manufacturing. You see that a lot in the real world, right? Where you've got one city that's largely industrial and another city fairly close that's more of
Manufacturing.
well, yeah, one's manufacturing, one's trade,
Right.
or commerce. And
Vice versa. Yeah.
but think about that. Think about, well, how far are towns apart? Well,
That depends on how your system of travel works.
yeah, but if you think of it in the context of, again, how is the world lived in, that's going to affect, like you said, your system of travel is going to affect how far apart are people going to stop and make the next city.
Hmm.
And also, if you're going to have a gathering of people, they need to have water, they need to have food. So you're not likely going to build a city just on the sand dune in the middle of the desert, because who the hell wants to live there?
Right. Well, that's the thing I always tried to do with D&D, and I understand why you want your players to travel long distances sometimes between places. But if I sent them from one city to another as long as it was the next city or next town over, it was usually the travel distance between places was usually only 1 day.
Mhm.
Because realistically, and I'm just saying this realistically, in the world of Dungeons and Dragons, 90% of travel in Dungeons and Dragons is on foot. If that's the case, nobody is walking more than 1 day worth to get to the next town.
That or you're going to have not necessarily officially designated, but reused campsites at
Right,
roughly that interval.
right. You're only traveling about a day before you have to. Well, you're only traveling exactly 1 day before you have to stop because we've established that nighttime is dangerous.
Right.
This is a world without electronic lamps, so it's, torches, and if you've ever tried to move by torchlight, it's kind of terrible.
Yeah, and so if you keep that kind of stuff, at least for me, if I keep that kind of stuff in mind, I don't have to know details. I can just go, well, okay, so this is this, which means that's probably that. Or at the very least, it's not the same thing, so it's going to be one of these three other things.
Well, and I think another thing is, and this is something that sort of happens with people, new GMs are oftentimes, and I don't want this to sound rude, but it's probably going to come across like me poo pooing the system. A lot of times, new GMs are pushed towards playing Dungeons and Dragons, which everybody's pushed towards playing Dungeons and Dragons most of the time. But I feel that you're best GMing in a setting that you understand strongly.
Very
And
much.
not everybody grasps or has a solid understanding of fantasy.
Hmm.
And so sometimes something like Mutant City Blues or Cyberpunk or Delta Green, Call of Cthulhu, Twilight 2000, games that are not necessarily set in a setting that is outside of the normal realm,
Hmm.
right? So near modern or postmodern settings often help GMs understand how to GM better because like in our in our Mutant City Blues game, you would ask me a question, it's set 10 years into the future. That's not that far into the future that it's not unrealistic to believe that, yeah, okay, system of government still works the same way. The city's still laid out pretty much the same way. There's things that it's not unrealistic to just go, look, it's just like today, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. You've got a solid frame of reference.
Right. And I don't think that's a bad place. If you don't have a solid frame of reference or understanding of fantasy settings, maybe don't play a fantasy game or play a fantasy game set in a near modern setting.
Well, you could always do and I know it's been done a lot. I just can't think of any examples, but what do you want to say, modern setting that has reverted to fantasy, where the tech doesn't work for whatever reason, kind of a post-apocalypse thing where it's gone back to a
So,
pseudo fantasy type thing.
Warpland,
Warpland, even Rifts is really set up that way.
Rifts. I mean, Savage Rifts exists now and it's good. There's a lot of things that you could do in a, you know, Weird West, or just there's a lot of things you could do in a fantasy setting that don't have to necessarily be um look at uh Fragged Empire.
Mhm. Yeah. It's just taking that logical extension of what is,
Yeah.
and that's gonna vary from person to person.
Yeah, and again, it's just finding what works for you.
Mhm.
Because again, like I said, I I can do fantasy. I've done it a lot. It's not necessarily my genre, but I can do it because I've been around and consumed enough of that media that yeah, sure, I can roll something off the top of my head.
Mhm.
But is it going to be what I do best? Maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe, I feel closer to, near modern stuff or even cyberpunk stuff. I have a better grasp and understanding of how to tell a story like that. It's hard to tell a procedural police story in a fantasy setting.
It's a lot tougher, yeah. Although with some of the stuff you could find with magics, maybe not.
Yeah, there's ways to do it, but it's just a matter of find what fits you. And then from there, if you're a GM and say your your specialty is that you're really good with urban fantasy, which is like a near modern fantasy style,
Mm-hmm.
finding players is not that hard. I honestly. If you have friends that are remotely interested in role playing or at least Dungeons and Dragons, sitting them down and going, "Look, I don't have Dungeons and Dragons, but I have the Dresden Files RPG, and we could play an urban fantasy." And as long as they can understand what the world is, I don't think you're going to have a hard time convincing them to play something.
No, I think you're right.
Unless they have absolutely their heart set on learning and only play in Dungeons and Dragons, I don't think you're going to have a hard time convincing people to try something new.
No, probably not. And I think, that's part of our thing, right? Just be willing to try those things. Look, urban fantasy is not particularly my thing, but I'd happily play it. Don't expect me to particularly run it, but I'd play it.
Yeah, I want to get an urban fantasy game going at some point in the near future because that is kind of one of my things that I'm really into.
Hmm.
No, but it's just a matter of find what works for you, getting the players and making sure you're having fun too. Because as the GM, it's oftentimes so many times that us as GMs just take a back seat to some stuff and are like, yeah, I don't really enjoy this, but I'm running it because my friends are having fun.
Hmm. But I think that comes to two. You have to learn how to make it fun for yourself.
Yeah, what do you want to do? What wild crazy thing do you want to try and do with this story?
Hmm.
And if you do it, if you go ahead and start throwing wild, crazy things in there, I think your players are going to latch onto them and have fun with that too.
Hmm.
Because the minute you start having fun with your players is a completely different game than just doing a slog through whatever.
Yeah.
And that was a lot of words, and that was very deep.
Yeah. Not bad for off the cuff.
Yeah. And I would say, I think it's time for Game of the Week.
Game of the week.
Game of the week. Game of the week.
All right. You go first.
You get
or
to
am I
go
going
first this
I
week.
get to go first. All right. I picked out a game for Game of the Week this week, Steve.
Oh, did you?
Yes, I did.
I sure hope you would. That makes Game of the Week awkward when you don't pick out a game.
We're going to play Tiddlywinks. Nope. This week, my Game of the Week is going to be the Terminator RPG.
Oh, it came out.
Yeah, it came out from Nightfall Games, which are the people who brought us Slay Industries, which you've heard us talk about before.
I
Um,
drool on
and
that game.
I was looking at the listing on Drive-Thru, and I knew that Andrew Gaska had worked on Terminator. I had not realized he is apparently credited as the lead writer.
Mhm.
Now, if you're not familiar with Andrew Gaska, his biggest RPG credit is being the lead writer on Alien from Free League, which has drawn rave reviews from pretty much everyone I've heard say anything about it. So this is a guy who's got a lot of experience writing games based on IP. He has worked in IP related stuff for years as, a consultant for film franchises, all sorts of stuff. But the Terminator RPG is, it's an officially licensed thing. It's based on the original The Terminator movie and the associated graphic novels from Dark Horse Comics. So, it is, and I'm sure this had to do with their licensing deal, whatever, but it is kind of fairly narrowly focused. But, it's the 80s and future war, it's saying, they've got all the main characters, Sarah Connor, Kyle Reese, the T-800.
Yeah, I want to play this. I want to play this really bad because I want to know. I want to know for myself what this game looks like.
Yeah, I'm curious about how their dice mechanic works because it's a little bit it's interesting.
Yeah, okay, that's one thing, but I want to know how do I put this? Terminator is kind of a you could hmm. Huh.
I could see you being more curious about it from the kind of cinema standpoint.
So I don't want to tell you a lot because I think I might have a game here.
Well, there is a free quick start or pay what you want quick start. If you
Okay.
just want to take it for a test drive, I don't know exactly what all it includes. Right now, the PDF, as we're speaking, looks to be on sale for about $20. Normally, it's 25. But there's also a bundle, which it's included in, that comes with not only that, two parts of the quick start, the director's pack booklet, and a campaign book, which is $33. Normally
Okay.
44 and change.
All right. I'm going to put the gauntlet out live on air. If
Uh-oh.
you're interested in playing a Terminator RPG run by yours truly, please, and this is how you do it, direct message me on Discord and say, I'm in, and you will be added to a channel that we can discuss when, where, and how.
I would like to claim at least a tentative spot in
Well,
this.
no shit, Sherlock. You, you are
And if you're confused about which one of us, just come on our Discord and
and
tag
message.
at other Steve, and it'll get
Well,
both of us.
yeah, you could message either one of us and you'll get an answer. Like, listen, both of us have the authority to add people to channels.
This is true.
Don't worry. But yeah, I'm throwing the gauntlet down on air because I'm running this. I'm getting my hands on this and running it as soon as possible. I will have, yeah, probably by the end of this summer, we'll have a campaign of this, at least a one shot of this going.
Fair.
Because I just had a thought, because I was gonna say, I'm like, I wonder how they do that, and then no, I answered my own question. But anyways, yeah, very cool. Transformers. No. Terminator RPG. Very different franchise.
I got to get a hold of some of the guys from Nightfall at some point.
Yeah,
It's going to be fun scheduling time, though, because they're in Scotland, I think, is where the company's based out of.
that's not a big deal. They're only like,
5 hours ahead of us.
yeah, that's not a huge
I
deal.
think they're on GMT.
Yeah, I got friends that live on GMT time, so it's just a matter of coordinating. We'll just have to do like a really early morning thing. Anyways,
Enough time zone tomfoolery.
time zone tomfoolery is what we deal with all the time. Anyways, I got a game.
Okay.
You know, we were talking about the GM as a player too, right?
Mhm.
I got a game called Oops All GMs.
Okay.
It's a free it's a free RPG, turning the normal game on its head by having many GMs play with a singular player.
Okay. Is this on drive-through?
It is on drive-through. It's called Oops All GMs. I'll send you the link if you'd like.
Yeah, it'll be easier to find than me, because there's probably punctuation in it that screws with the search bar.
It's just in the Steves.
Mm.
It uses the wannabe games pace die system, takes narrative roleplay and mixes it with a push your luck mechanic, which could be fun. All of the GMs play as a musical supergroup that refuses to play their next gig before the player solves all of their little problems. This just looks
Oh.
stupid and fun.
Oh, yeah, it does, doesn't it, though?
It really does. It looks like a game. I'll tell you who I want to play this game with. I want to play it with me and you and Huli and Chris and Tom.
That would be fun. I can tell you some other people that I can think of with a little less time zoning. This would be fun with Jesse and Prince of Apathy, too.
Yeah, those two would be. Yeah, but which one gets to be the player? Who gets to be the player at that point? Because do we give it to Jesse or do we give it to.
Wow. Yeah. Or, wow, there's any number of people. Ghost, I think, would be fun in that, too.
Ghost would be fun. Oh man, not to call out people on our Discord.
Too late.
Zero.
Slappy.
Yeah. No, I at the same time though, I kind of want to get a bunch of guys from the D20 network together.
This, you know what? That actually would be.
Like, I wouldn't mind doing like a charity live stream with a bunch of guys from the D20 network and play this.
Yeah, that would be a really cool charity live stream game.
As a matter of fact, thank you. It goes in the cart, and I will be reading this week. It's supposed to rain tomorrow, so I'm gonna do some reading and see if we can get that coordinated, because St. Jude's is doing some charity stuff, so we might be able to jump on that.
There you go.
Plus, I think what is it? Extra Life, but man, I don't want to do a 24-hour stream of this. No, I know St. Jude's was doing like 60 minutes of gaming charity stuff, so maybe
I'm
check into
sure we
that.
could find something one way or another.
Yeah, definitely. We'll make sure it goes to a good cause at least. But that would be a good charity live stream. But yeah, that's Oops All GMs.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, look, if you're looking for ideas, it's literally basically, there's any number, go find some reruns of Behind the Music and just steal things.
You don't even have to do that. Just what is that called? Dang it. Hold on. Give me like 2 seconds. Uh Tales from the Tour Bus.
Okay, I'd not heard of that one.
So it's animated by Mike Judge, who did King of the Hill and some
Beavis and
of
Butthead.
Beavis and Butthead. And it is literally musicians talking about different tales from the tour bus.
I'm
Uh,
gonna have to look that up.
I think it's on Hulu,
Oh, even
but
better.
it is. I've been watching just clips and stuff. People talking about Waylon. People talking about anytime James Brown gets brought up, somebody does a James Brown impression. So you have all these famous musicians doing James Brown impression. Yeah, that's one that would be a good influence on this. Is it on Prime? Can I watch it on Prime? No, it's on Cinemax. I'd have to rent it. Dang it. Johnny Paycheck, Jerry Lee Lewis, George Jones and Tammy Wynette, Billy Joe Shaver, Waylon Jennings, Blaze Foley. Yeah, that's just all people. That's season 1. Season 2, they're talking about George Clinton, Rick James, Boosty Collins, James Brown, Morris Day and the Time, Betty Davis, and Last George Clinton. Yeah, it's only got 2 seasons, but man, that's a cool series. That's a fun one.
Oh yeah, and they haven't even gotten into the crazy hair metal rockers.
No. And the sad thing is I think it's probably canceled because 2017, 2018. Now, this is a rated R series. Keep that in mind, kids, but something to use for some interesting stories. I'll tell you a story that I heard from that off the air. But yeah, that's mine. Oops, all GMs.
All right. Well, that sounds like a hell of a lot of fun.
Yeah. With that all being said, we want to thank you all for listening. As always, links to everything are in the show notes. Patreon, Discord, Twitter, TikTok, Twitch. That might be coming shortly.
Maybe.
YouTube eventually. I know that's the first time we're announcing this, but we got a little bit more testing to do, so just be patient. We're not going to be live streaming probably not until maybe mid-June, early July.
Yeah. Well, I'm still trying to find cameras that don't break on a consistent basis. So.
Yeah, you having camera problems?
No, I was making a joke about my face.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say you just got a new camera. Dang it.
No, I have legitimately had people try to take pictures of me, and the camera broke though.
Ooh, yucks.
This is a long time ago, but anyhow.
Yeah, with that all being said, we want to thank you for listening. Remind you to get out there and play some RPGs and be kind to one another.
Yep, take care, y'all.
Intro and outro music by the band 12 Noon. You can email us at meandsteverpg@gmail.com. You can find us on Twitter and RPGs. Find us on Facebook at Me and Steve RPG Podcast, on Discord at Me and Steve RPGs, and as always, all of these links are in the show notes. Thank you, and be kind to one another.
How much for the cigar?
Cigar, $20, dog. You gotta go down the street to the store and buy that.